for Chapter 8 of A History of Murder. I'm so glad you're joining me for more of the story. For just a little bit of a recap of Chapter 7. So Chloe has returned from Art McMillan's house, and Art is the victim in our cozy mystery. And Art has been Grandma's boyfriend. And so Chloe is understandably concerned about Grandma, but in Chapter 7, she learns Grandma wasn't in love with him. She actually hated the man. And of course, Chloe's pretty concerned about that because did Grandma have something to do with his demise? Chapter 8 is a big deal. We find out a lot about Art McMillan's past. So let's go ahead and get started with Chapter 8, Salt in the Wound. I thought I might be sick. Teach him a lesson for what? I should start at the beginning, Grandma Lily said. She swallowed hard and rubbed her forehead. Stop stalling, I urged her. If you don't tell me, I can't help you. She patted my hand and then began. I learned about Art through a friend. You remember Nancy Phillips? I only vaguely remembered the name. Nancy introduced you? I asked. No, listen, Grandma Lily said sternly. Nancy and her husband Joe lived in Jericho Falls until his death about 5 years ago. Losing Joe was so tough on her. Afterward, she sold their home here and moved to Lakeview. She bought a townhouse, which was much easier for her to maintain than their big Victorian. It was hard to say goodbye to her, but it was for the best. She was enjoying a very comfortable retirement there. That is, until she met Arthur McMillan. What happened? Art milked her dry, that's what happened. Grandma Lily's voice shook with rage. What do you mean? He charmed her. He convinced her that he loved her, got her to foot the bill for expensive cruises, luxury cars, and fancy dinners, you name it. It wasn't long before he persuaded her to marry him, so he could take full control of her money. But once they got married, he was out of there. He took everything from her. Even sold the townhouse out from under her. She had to move across the country to be taken in by her daughter and son-in-law. She died a few months ago. She was 77, broke, and broken-hearted. I sat in disbelief. That's terrible. Art is a terrible person. Or at least, he was. I'm confused, I said. How did he end up in Jericho Falls? I never figured that part out, Grandma Lily said. Maybe he thought it was funny to come back to the place Nancy lived for so many years, a kind of salt in the wound. But whatever it was that brought him here, imagine my surprise when I ran into him at the post office one day about a year ago. Did you recognize him? No. He was schmoozing the woman at the counter while setting up his mail delivery. When he introduced himself to her as Arthur McMillan, I nearly fell over. Then what? Nothing at first. I made a beeline home and called Nancy in Pennsylvania. Soon after, though, we made a plan. Which was that you would lure Art in and teach him a lesson? I threw up my hands and rolled my eyes. I'm sorry, Grandma, but it sounds crazy and dangerous. Grandma Lily went to the cabinet above the refrigerator. Inside, she removed a stack of envelopes. These are letters between Nancy and me, she said. They explain everything. You should read them. My head was spinning, and the fear that my grandma had something to do with Art's demise crept back in. How would I ever help her get out of this, considering she was running a con job on the man who had just been murdered? If the cops found this out, they'd immediately assume she was the killer. I felt the packet held together with a rubber band. It must contain at least 20 potentially incriminating letters. I wasn't sure I wanted to read them in case they made it that much harder for me to protect her and myself. Who else knows about this? I mean, that you weren't really in love with Art. Grandma Lily shook her head slowly. Only Nancy knew the plan. Read the letters. Not now. I've had enough for one day. I didn't say another word. I climbed the staircase, letting my hand drag over its beautifully carved banister, placed the packet of letters on my nightstand, and went to bed. Well, it's a shorty, but that chapter tells us a lot about the background of the victim and really starts getting the wheels turning. Did Grandma have something to do with it? Did something she do kick off some sort of turn of events that got Art murdered? You'll have to tune back in to find out what happens next. If you're dying to know, you can go buy the ebook at any major ebook retailers, and the paperback is available on Amazon. And I look forward to seeing you again for Chapter 9. Bye-bye.